Good evening, everyone. I'm just checking, do we have quorum, Nicole?
Yes, we do, Trustee Schwartz.
Fantastic. All right, well, let's get the meeting underway. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole budget meeting this evening. I would like to just acknowledge that our meeting is taking place on unceded Algonquin territories. And I would like to thank the Algonquin Nations for hosting our meeting on their lands this evening. Now, tonight's meeting, and it's a continuation of last week, where we are planning to hear from delegations, though I'm not sure we actually have any delegations this evening. And we'll also begin debate on the staff recommended budget for the 2022-2023 school year. So could I please see if someone could put forward a mover for the agenda, to approve the agenda, please? Trustee Lyra, thank you very much. All those in favor, or sorry, are there any changes to the agenda this evening? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, seeing none, the agenda is thus approved. Before we get to any delegations that we may have with us this evening, just wondering if there are any trustees who wish to disclose a conflict of interest. And if not, just a reminder to trustees, should there be a conflict of interest, just please do submit a written disclosure in advance of the budget meetings. Okay, do we have any delegations who, I know we didn't have any written delegations asking to appear before us this evening, but I'm not sure if we have anyone who's come forward this evening. Nicole?
No, there are no delegations.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move then right to report 22-032, which is the staff recommended budget. And just reminder to folks that we do not have the motion on the floor yet. Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I'd like to move the recommendation, please.
Thank you very much, Trustee Blackburn. Would you like introduction?
Yes, Madam Chair, very briefly. Before I make a comment on the actual budget, I'd like to acknowledge that this is CFO Carson's last budget. And I would just like to indicate to everyone listening that it's been an honor for me to work with him for the last almost 12 years now, and I got to know him a little bit even before I became a trustee. And I wish you all the best, Superintendent Carson. May you get to golf a lot, read a lot, listen to a lot of music, and spend quality time with your family. It's been great having you around, and you will be missed for sure. And I'd like to thank, along with Superintendent Carson, all the other staff that work so diligently on this budget. It's truly a huge endeavor with the size of our district and the amount of money involved. And I know a lot of care has been given to it. And I believe that it's a balanced budget. And I believe that it will go a long way to meet the goals of our strategic plan. And so with that in mind, I look forward to the debate and questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Trustee Blackburn. And please do note, I'm not sure who's taking care of the timer, but we don't have the timer going. Perhaps we could have that as we get our meeting underway. Thank you. And I see Trustee Bell with her hand up. Go ahead, Trustee Bell. Trustee Bell, if you're speaking, you are on mute. You're on mute, Trustee Bell.
Apologies, I had
No,
technical difficulties there.
Great. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Chair. I want to start off by also expressing my gratitude to all the people that took time out to write to me and to connect with me regarding our budget, and following conversations that I've had with the amazing CFO Carson, Superintendent Dua, many students, and some of the members of the Indigenous Education Committee and the ACE. I really wanted to know what would have the greatest impact on our equity-related goals. And with that information in mind and in hand, I'd like to bring forth an amendment to the staff recommended budget. Would that be possible, Chair?
Sorry, I just needed to unmute myself. Yes, please proceed, Trustee Bell, recognizing that we have 2 minutes on the timer. And
okay, do I get the full for do I get the full time for introduction, or does it take the 2 minutes?
Well, you should have time for introduction. You will have I think 3 minutes if you've got for introduction of your amendment. Great,
thank you. As we do have the amendment, hopefully it can be put up, and I'll read from the actual text that I sent to trustee colleagues right before this meeting. So it says, whereas there is a recognition in the recommended budget that important investments in staff must be made to support equity and inclusion objectives in alignment with our goals of the strategic plan. Whereas the district level identity-based data illustrates a disparity in student outcomes, achievement, program pathways, suspension rates, graduation rates, also a disparity in experiences in school, the sense of belonging, for example, and a disproportionate representation of Indigenous, Black, and minoritized English language learners, students living in poverty, and students in our specialized/English programs, resulting in persistent achievement and opportunity gaps. Whereas aligned with the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap, the goal of the Student Achievement Through Equity program is to ensure that every student succeeds academically and develops a positive sense of well-being. Whereas the OCDSB SATE program, the Student Achievement Through Equity program, has been modeled on successful interventions and has already begun to demonstrate results. And whereas additional culturally competent frontline staff will facilitate the expansion of this program to OCDSB communities in need and will have a direct impact on equity-seeking community, students, and educators. I am requesting that the board approve $188,000 in support of expanding the SATE program to schools and communities in need through the addition of 1 community engagement liaison and 1 instructional coach. I just want to say that I understand that the current frontline positions of the SATE were reallocations. We've worked within what we have. And this, in fact, would be one of the first.
Trustee Bell, yeah. Trustee Bell, you're out
of time.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not showing. My apologies. That was entirely my fault, Trustee Bell. You do still have 35 seconds on the clock. I'm sorry.
Great.
My apologies.
It's okay, I'm just about to finish up. So basically, we have 21 OCDSB raised schools and only 11 receiving the SATE program right now. These positions would not only help reinforce the current program, they would permit the expansion to the schools and communities that we know are in need within our board. And ultimately, these will be the positions that will have a great impact on the lives of students. They will reach the desks of the students. And so with that, I hope my colleagues will support this. And I am grateful to all those that have reached out on this.
Okay, thank you very much, Trustee Bell. And again, my deepest apologies for interrupting you.
No problem.
Go ahead, Trustee Blackburn, on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. And I thank my colleague for bringing forward this amendment. I would just like to make one point. While I am totally supportive of raised schools and always have been, I would like to remind my colleagues, which I have done many times before, that poverty exists in all our schools. It exists in Barrhaven, and oftentimes people don't think about that, but we have in fact expanded our food bank in recent times, and there's a good reason for that. My question would be through you, Madam Chair, to the Director of Education. I don't have a problem at all with the first one, the full-time engagement liaison. However, I would like a staff comment about the instructional coach. And the premise of my question is, if I remember correctly, this was tried once before, and the director at that time was quite concerned with the teacher shortage that we have, that would indeed be pulling another teacher out. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have classes that don't have any teachers, one teacher is a lot in my view. And additionally, I'd like a comment. The other kind of concern, and again, it's not if my colleagues are supportive of this, it's not a hill I'm going to die on, and I'll be happy to vote for it. But the other concern I have is, given what our students have been through, and again, it's not a ton of money, but it would pay for a frontline staff member, like a social worker or a couple of EAs, who would be working directly with the students in the classroom.
Director?
Through you, Madam Chair. Certainly, just my mic, sorry. Certainly, what the trustee has identified are considerations that we would concur with. We do have some caution around expanding a newly formed program, and by adding a coach. You are correct, Trustee Blackburn, that would mean pulling a teacher into the cohort. There is currently a coach that is working with the program, and if one of the goals is an expansion, there is a caution that I would offer about an expansion that might come too soon. We really appreciate that. Trustee Bell has indicated that the actions that are being taken with this project has started to yield results, and I would concur. I did myself actually sit down with the project in which some of the staff providing in one of the schools, and it certainly is promising. But if you were going to ask us for data at this point, we don't have data yet in terms of EQAO, because as we all know, EQAO has been stalled. So again, certainly the focus here has emerged and did emerge out of a trustee concern that was raised 2 years ago around the lowest performing schools, not doing something different to support those schools, the intersections with poverty, the intersections with some other identity drivers. And so we built on that trustee, the trustee feedback and the trustee concern to create this project, but we do certainly, we are cautious about an expansion at this point, simply because we want to ensure that any expansion is built on evidence of success so far. So I concur essentially with what the trustee has identified as the cautions.
Thank you, Madam Director. The word caution, the word cautious is quite cautious, I might say, but I think your point has come across. I would have preferred stronger language, but so I would encourage my colleagues to listen to your caution, and perhaps somebody could propose an amendment where we would add frontline staff, but it's not going to be me, but if somebody does put that forward, I will definitely support it, like EAs or another social worker.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Blackburn. I have Trustee Scott on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, a question of clarification through you to the mover. I thought I heard you refer to the board having 21 schools in need, which are in the SAIT program. Is the number 21 correct?
There are 21 raised schools, but currently 11 receiving support from SAIT. I will also caution that I've been told is not the be all and end all of indicators of whether or not a school is in need, and therefore I have kept the language quite broad in my recommendation to leave it up to the experts that are working on this to identify which in fact would be the schools in need.
Thanks very much for that clarification. Second question through you, Madam Chair, to staff is the community engagement liaison position a teaching position or not?
Sorry, wrong button. Through you, Chair. I will throw that over to Superintendent Dua.
Thank you very much. And through you, Chair, the community education liaison worker is not a teacher. They're an educator. They work within the community. They work, and essentially the way I like to put it is like they work for the community, but it's compensated by the board.
Thank you for that clarification. Next question again to staff, and that is, if in fact we added these two positions, approximately how many additional schools could be added into the SAIT program?
Superintendent Dua.
Through you, Chair. And so what the SAIT program is an inquiry. We use our student success, academic success to develop a positive sense of well-being. And so what we do is that we look at schools data, and the inquiry looks at schools that have common needs and common interests and common desires to learn from the educators. And so depending on the number of schools that have the same needs, we put those schools into that hub together and work with those schools. As of right now, we have 2 hubs with 11 schools. One group is 6 and one group is 5. And in order to expand, we probably have a similar number in another group.
So you'd be looking at potentially creating another hub within SAIT, which could include a small group of schools.
Absolutely. The greatest indicator of success in learning is the teacher efficacy. So bringing staff together to learn together yields the most success in our opinion. And so that's what we would do.
Thanks very much for those clarifications. One more question, again, Madam Chair, through you to staff, and that is how much funding is remaining in the budget before we hit the 1% use of reserves, which is capped by the ministry without requiring ministry permission?
CFO Carson.
Chair, I believe that I'll ask Kevin to confirm, but I believe it's between $225,000 and $250,000.
Thank you. That's a little more than I thought it was. So thanks very much. That's all my questions for now, and I will think about what I've heard.
Thank you very much, Trustee Scott. Trustee Campbell. Trustee Campbell. All right, well, I see that Trustee Campbell seems to be having some computer issues, so he'll come back on momentarily. So I'll just proceed with Trustee Penny, and when Trustee Campbell comes back, we'll put him next on the list. Go ahead, trustee Penny.
Hello, I do have a question for the staff, and I would imagine that the ultimate measurement of success for measures that are designed to increase equity would be increasing graduation rates, right? Is that true? Is that what we're shooting for in the end?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I would suggest that I would agree. Yes, that is one of the measures. It isn't the only measure. One of the things that is really important, and we've learned this over this past 2 years especially, is a sense of belonging and engagement and well-being. And so engagement is measured by multiple pieces, including the sense of belonging, but also when we look at things like attendance and self-reported satisfaction with school experience. So I would be loath to say that it was the increasing graduation is the only measure, because again, we have students in grade 8 and grade 9 where we are wanting to look at improved outcomes for those students as well, rather than waiting the 4 or 5 years to their graduation point. So there are multiple measures, graduation being one of them, engagement and incremental success, whether it's credit accumulation, whether it's attendance, whether it's discipline, are also parts of the data that are collected to measure improvement for our students.
Okay, so I understand that, and I'm all for equity. I think it's a good idea, but ultimately, I mean, a student can feel like they belong, and we take care of the well-being, but if they don't graduate, then that is not good, right?
Absolutely. And so I would say to you, Trustee Penny, I am a firm believer in the final deliverable of graduation. I am known to say every kid across the stage, and that means meeting their full potential. So for some students, that is a certificate of graduation. For other students, it is a certificate of accomplishment, but certainly our commitment is to ensuring that all children reach their fullest potential by the time they are ready to depart, whether it's at 18 or 21. And I know that Superintendent Dua is itching to add something to this commentary because he has built a lot of the work that he's doing on measurements of achievement. So Superintendent Dua, kindly add.
Thank you, Director, and to you, Chair. And Trustee Penny, thank you very much for the question. Definitely, we do have goals for the program, and that's to ensure that students succeed academically and develop a positive sense of well-being. And the end result was obviously to graduate, to achieve their full potential. We also have foundational principles and objectives that we want students to achieve. But one of the things that I think we do very differently in this program is the success indicators that we look for. And we realize that success indicators are going to look different from different schools, for different students, for different educators and different families. And so having these little success indicators to track to see, for example, for some families, engagement in extracurricular activities or the reading program we're doing for parents might be the decision or the factor that ends moving that student. Those small little moves sometimes are fundamental moves for some families. And so being able to track those and able to identify those. One of the things that we see in programs that look at the goal as the final outcome is that, for example, if I give an example, is that Director Williams-Taylor is a grade 3 teacher, and her goal is to have all her students succeed academically. At the end of the year, they all get level 4 in EQAO, and they have a wonderful year. The problem is that without those success indicators, you cannot duplicate what she did for another teacher. You have to know what she did for every student, every family, and how you track that information. And so one of the things that we do in the SAFE program is track those success indicators. And so those little moves that you won't see right away will hopefully yield fundamental and transferable learning down the line.
Okay, thank you. That's a great explanation, Superintendent Dua. And I'd certainly at some point like to see those reports or those measurements outlined in a report, because I am all for like leveling the playing field and giving help to people that absolutely need it. But I do want to also, and I'm going to sound like an ogre here, but I do want to make sure that the things that we do are effective, right? And without measurement, without trustees understanding how effective they are, then we really don't have an idea of, and it can't be just a political thing. It has to be something that is measurable, something that is measurable not only to trustees, but to the public, right? Because, you know, at the end of the day, everyone wants their children to be successful. Everyone wants their children to walk across the stage, as the director put it, right? So I'm just trying to outline the wishes of, I think, of parents, what they want. So I would really like to see some sort of report at the end of the day, how successful our measures are. And thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Penny. I'm just wondering if we have Trustee Campbell back.
Oh my, yes, finally, thank you. Okay. After multiple attempts, appreciate it. Appreciate the wait. I imagine we're still on the Trustee Bell's motion, given the conversation. Okay.
We are Trustee Campbell, and sorry, I didn't see you come back onto the screen. So I see you now, and we
Yes.
are still on the amendment.
Okay, great, thank you. So, forgive me if it's all the questions already been floated there, but it was an important question for me. That is, my understanding is the cell edition, the coach edition. I think I understand it all. It sort of makes sense in terms of program expansion. I guess my question though is, and that's the proposal, and which is fine, you know, support in principle. But I guess my question to staff though is program expansion the right move at this time, or program enrichment with more resources for the existing schools, or indeed, does it make sense to wait a period and assess results, and whether, you know, things have to be changed around, maybe the resourcing mix looked at and this kind of thing before expansion? So I'd just like to understand, I guess, the staff strategic thoughts, I guess, around this.
Thank you, through you, Chair. From a strategic point of view, what I would say is that I would have some reservations about a full expansion. Enrichment is not going to hurt, because certainly enrichment to the existing structure would certainly allow us to deliver on some of the principles and the structures that are in existence. But I don't want to create the notion that by adding you know, the resources that have been identified, that we would move to immediate expansion. It took almost 2 years to get this show on the road, if you will, because from inception to actually launching to actually seeing momentum, albeit we did have the disruption of the pandemic and the back and forth and so forth. It does take a while to bring a new concept into fruition and then see it flowing effectively. So even if we did add, which we have done, some resource allocation and shifting, into Trustee Bell's comments, very rightly, reallocating and shifting resources around internally to add to the structure. I would say to you that we would want to enrich and deepen before we start going wider, because there is course correction that is also a part of expansion. That is something to be considered. 11 schools in a project of this kind is nothing to take lightly. 11 schools is significant, and especially when we know that these are schools where there are a variety of factors of fragility that we need to consider in order to build strength. So I would say enrichment over immediate expansion would be the way that I would go, simply because I just feel that moving too quickly to expand further without all of the building blocks in place don't necessarily maximize the potential of the project.
Great, thank you. And I suppose that makes some intuitive sense to me, since presumably the first 11 were the most key first 11. I'm guessing anyway. But I guess the follow-up question, given that reply to staff, if the board were inclined to invest more in SAIT and its success and the success of students and the ability of families and communities to support, and our ability to support and all that. What would be the investments in SAIT that would make sense in terms of deepening and enriching our current I guess HR model for SAIT within the context of the existing schools?
Superintendent Dubois, I know you have some ideas here. Would you care to respond?
Thank you very much, and to you, Chair. I'm a little conscientious about the word enrichment being utilized in this particular case. I think one of the things we're trying to do is to, I talked briefly a little earlier about success criteria, so I'm looking at what we're doing each and every day to see how effective it's being for the students that we're working with and what content learning the staff have to learn in order to support the students and grow. So what I'd like to look at is we're trying right now to hone and focus and be more precise in the way we address the support that we're providing. And so I'm trying to identify and go deeper rather than just to enrich. And so it's not necessarily additional resources per se that's going to make that substantial difference. It's time and opportunity to go and hone in. Now, the unfortunate situation is that due to COVID, we weren't able to do some of that collective work that we with staff efficacy work and bringing staff together and learning from each other, because some of these schools are small schools where you have one teacher teaching a particular grade and not having the opportunity to work with other colleagues and work with students and identify those areas that we need to grow as educators to support the students and their families. And so just an opportunity to hone in and being concise and being able to actually fulfill the vision of the program in itself. And we weren't able to do that due to COVID.
And that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate the reply. I guess a follow-up question, though, if I may. And I'm okay. I have a few seconds, and that is to your point, though. Given the COVID delay and that kind of thing, if we wanted to, in a sense, get back on track, would it make sense to, I don't know, have additional coaching, more release time, additional coaches, et cetera, to sort of like get back on, I guess, the original plan or original path? I mean, would that make sense, or is your advice not really?
Through you, Chair, I'm never going to say no to additional support, and so I'm probably the wrong person to ask that question of. One of the things that we do need to focus on is to be intentional in the work that we do and continue to support families. As I might have shared with you, even as of tomorrow evening, there's going to be 150 families learning in 11 different languages and how to support their children reading at home. And so being able to have that time to do that work and be able to track and the impact that work has and back at the school, it's an important element, and then we need to do that. We weren't able to take advantage of any of that earlier on. And so we do have a lot of things to follow up on as a team, as a plan, as an initiative. And so we're working on enhancing and the work that we already had envisioned of doing prior to COVID.
Okay, so effectively what I'm hearing is you need time, but would not necessarily more, I don't know, data analysts, not necessarily more cell or coaches, or maybe MLO, more ethnocultural, different, more and different ethnocultural insights, or am I hearing that you need time principally? It's maybe premature to expand. If these things are true, are you saying, obviously, I hear you, always welcome, new resources, always welcome.
Trustee Campbell.
What would be a good resource? And that's it, Mr. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Campbell. Go ahead, Superintendent.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair, an additional community education liaison would be an important element. The work that they're doing right now is pivotal in bringing the community together with the school. We were only allocated one at the time, and there's 11 schools. So in order to be there at the schools in the morning to meet parents and welcome them, it's been a challenge. And so just being more intentional in terms of the work and supporting families would be a vital part of the job. I mean, anytime you have an additional coach in order to support the work and just give more work along the job embedded part and being there to support teachers and the work that they're doing in the classroom, it's always viable. And so, like I said, I'm probably the wrong person to ask that question with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, thanks Superintendent. Director, did you wish to, I saw your mic go off. I wasn't sure if you want to add.
Yeah, I understood in my conversations with the superintendent, I would concur that the community connection piece would certainly be something that would, I won't use the word enrich anymore, but would deepen some of the work that in the immediate. But I think getting to Trustee Campbell's point, I think that while it is any resourcing will be used, in order for us to identify precisely where the best use is required, we probably need a little bit more time to be able to assess that from a performance and outcome point of view.
That's what I was thinking. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification, Director. Trustee Lyra, I did see you raise your hand earlier, but I don't see it up any longer.
Yeah, I took it down. I'm
Okay.
sort of musing about this.
So do you have your hand,
yeah.
sorry, do you have your hand up or not?
Now it's
Okay,
up.
perfect, go ahead.
So I've been thinking about this. I think it's really important that we prioritize equity. I think it's really important that we ensure that we have the supports in low-income areas to make sure that every child gets a fair shake at the system. I am apprehensive based on what has been said by the director and through Rob's questions about whether or not we should be expanding the program now, or we should be trying to reallocate that money in another way to help that community. If the board was inclined to spend $200,000 on helping raise schools and other families in low-income areas, what would the director recommend we spend that $200,000 on?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I would say to you that you've narrowed it down to say if you were going to spend $200,000 on raise schools. I think that I don't know that that is the only area of focus that you might attend to. When I do think about some of the needs around special education, some of our needs around some of the community pieces, I think that might be a broader ask. I do take from a page from the CFO's book where there is always a value, and what we did do is we did a bit of an analysis of things that we have added, and we remind trustees that we have appreciated the flexibility to make in-year adjustments. So there have been adjustments that have been taken in year, but we can only do that when there is a cushion that we have, and so we are cutting it very close at the moment in terms of the amount of cushion that we are looking at. And I think that it's probably important to consider that just trying to spend to the end of the envelope in this moment is probably unwise when we have all just experienced that perfect example of all of the things that show up before we are when we're unprepared. So there have been a number of in-year adjustments that have been made this particular year, and we've made them the year before last or last year as well. And so my recommendation would be to give us some flexibility rather than looking for ways to spend to the last dime.
All right, I will rephrase my question. If the board has made the decision to spend $200,000 to address income inequity communities within the district, what is the best place you would recommend that we spend that money? So predisposing that the board has made the decision to put the money in the budget somewhere.
And so areas around supporting community engagement, community access, community support, We have a variety of barriers that some of our families and communities experience in being able to access schools. And so Superintendent Duas spoke about community liaison, and we are also always looking for ways to engage through translation, interpretation, and language access as well. So if I were to be asked, I hear, we are determined that we are spending $200,000 today. Where are you going to put it? At the moment, that is the area where we have a lot of challenge. And so that would be, if I were hard pressed, that would be where I would say the money should go.
Interesting. Thank you. I'm going to think about this for a bit.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Lyra. I don't know if there were any additional first-time speakers to this particular amendment. Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the second time. Oh, I'm sorry, actually, Trustee Blackburn, I believe you are first time on.
No, I spoke at the beginning.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Second time, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just a reminder, we're at 2 minutes for.
Yeah, I'll go quick. Okay, so if that's the case, Madam Chair, can you indicate to me procedurally how I would proceed? Would we have to defeat this and then put forward other amendments? Like if we wanted to change what we're adding?
Sorry, you're not asking me.
Yeah, as the chair, would we?
I'm sorry.
Yes, so procedurally, if
Yes.
we wanted to change the nature of the positions as.
You could amend the particular amendment. You could sub-amend, or we could defeat, and if defeated, we can vote on the full thing. If it's defeated, a trustee could raise a new amendment.
Okay, because it's kind of messy because the other positions aren't kind of close. So I think I'll just encourage my colleagues to heed the advice of the Director of Education and others and defeat this motion. And if the board is really, really committed to not leaving staff a cushion, that they could perhaps meet some needs in these communities that may emerge next year, then I would then submit that we should change the nature of the positions. But my preference is to leave staff a cushion to meet emerging needs, because we have learned as of recent times that things emerge, and we need to be able to address them. And if we spend all the money, we won't be able to do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Trustee Blackburn. I do apologize. I've been trying to eat my dinner at the same time as chairing the meeting, so I apologize for that. Staff, could we ensure that we have the timer going, please? Just it is hard to keep track of the time if we don't have that clock going. Trustee Campbell, you're up next for a second time.
Thank you very much. So just on the buffer and cushion thing first, and I haven't quite given up on the self and coach idea, but I'm just mulling it all over in my mind. In terms of that question, my understanding from previous conversations and statements by the CFO is that there's sort of really an annual expectation of significant lapsed funds, likely amounting to some millions, and that is probably being counted on to help float our reserves for the next budget cycle. And obviously we don't want to raid that kind of thing or count on that kind of thing too much. But I guess I'd sort of like a comment, because my understanding had been, and if it's not right, then I'm a little bit alarmed with the deficit. My understanding had been that there would be significant lapsed funds expected to be available throughout sort of the course of the year, unused funds that could be refloated here and there, and that's relatively common. But maybe I could get a further statement.
So this one would be, I can't see CFO Carson, but I'm quite confident that he's here.
Chair, I think the trustee is correct. Every year we have, when we set a budget, I think I've said it before, we are a control-oriented organization. So lots of groups will wait until later in the year to spend those dollars. And we always have certain areas of the board, certain departments that are unable to fully expend those dollars. That's why I think I said to the board one time, if we want to simply arrive at a year-end balanced figure, no surplus, no deficit, you almost have to budget for a deficit. The challenge we have this year is the uncertainty as we come out of COVID as to what sort of expenses we may see next year. And so there is no doubt that there will be, at the moment, if I had to pick one, I'd probably say transportation, where we won't expend all of the transportation dollars. But we won't know that until the year is underway. We've been aggressive, a little more aggressive than usual this year in terms of updating the enrollment projections and considering that additional revenue at this time instead of in the fall. And part of that was to try to minimize the amount of school reorganizations that would occur in the fall. School reorganization is a normal part of the years, but when we consider that this, is the first time, could be the first time in 3 years that we're returning to a more normal school year. We discussed this with Superintendent McCoy and her staff. We felt it was appropriate to take that step, and considering this year's enrollment numbers and the way they've continued to grow, we were comfortable with that. I think it's fair to say we don't have as much space as I think we might have in some years. There are risk factors out there. There's always risk factors out there. The recent storm here in Ottawa will cost us about $300,000 for tree removal. You don't get those every year, but something will happen. So we know that within our budget there are estimates, and some of those estimates will have over preserved some of the money, and some will have underestimated. So I'm not sure how to say it clear. We believe that if all of the cards fall properly, that in 2022-23, we would in fact incur a deficit of somewhere to $8 to $9 million. And we are doing that recognizing that we are carrying some staff that have been funded to help us work our way out of the pandemic. We've got some operational costs that will continue because of that. And so we don't expect all of that to disappear. But it's a combination of factors. Sorry, it's so wordy, but it's a little bit different than previous years. I think, for the current year, for the year that will end in August, we expect we will see a deficit somewhat smaller than what we had anticipated in the budget. But part of that was we were continuing to receive new amounts of COVID funding throughout the year that have worked our advantage. It's very unlikely we'll see that happening next year. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, trying to synthesize that. Thank you very much. I guess my next question would be perhaps, well, it's to staff through Madam Chair. I don't know who'd be appropriate to answer this, probably the director, but I guess the director will choose. And that is, if, again, I'm contemplating this particular amendment, if I don't know if it would be natural to sub-amend this amendment in that way, it may be. But if as Trustee Lyra suggested, if the board was motivated to spend some amount of money, the amount could be debated. If nothing else, to signal a board direction into an additional spend in the area of, I think, if I captured the director's words, in the area of improving community engagement and outreach in raise demographic areas. I may not have fully captured that. I stand to be corrected. But if there was a more generic amendment, which effectively was a financial set aside for staff to do the determination, to decide, okay, we have a set aside bucket. It could be expended on this kind of staff or that kind of staff, depending. But the general nature of the spend would have to be for a certain sort of framework purpose. Would that be something that would be too airy and loose, or would it be actionable by staff as a kind of amendment?
Director?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I would say that it would be actionable. I would say that it would be loose enough to give us some flexibility. Because what I'm hearing you say is that it would be essentially something structured around in the direction of community engagement and embracing community voice. And so there are a variety of ways that we would be able to do that in the explicit interest of student achievement and outcomes. So, again, so not necessarily advancing anything from the point of view of existing structures that are outside of the threshold of student achievement. But if you gave us that kind of space, some might feel it's a little loose, but it does give a general direction. And there are multiple avenues to travel in that direction for the purpose of the schools that we've been talking about.
Okay, thank you. I'll reflect on this.
Thank you, Trustee Campbell. Next up, I have Trustee Scott.
Thank you. I was thinking along somewhat similar lines to what Trustee Campbell was proposing. And I guess the question I will raise then is a procedural one, because if we were going to do a set aside for the purpose of X amount of dollars, I think, would that mean that we would need to defeat this motion and put a new motion on the floor? Because I'm not sure that could be done as a sub amendment to the amendment that's currently on the floor.
From my perspective, I don't know, Director, if you wanted to answer that, but from my perspective, I think for efficiency and clarity, it probably would be best that the motion were defeated and a new motion put on the table.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to know. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Scott. I did have Trustee Lyra as a second time, but again, the hand went down, so I don't know, Trustee Lyra, if you did want to speak again?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. I have Trustee Huff as a first time.
Hi, through you, Madam Chair, a question to staff. Is there a benefit of having a community engagement slush fund, as it were, designated versus leaving funds in the reserve to be used throughout the year as required? Is there a benefit for us earmarking this or over leaving it there for you to come back with a specific ask to board throughout the year? Can you just speak to that issue?
Director?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. And so one of the things that I do know that our Chief Financial Officer and Manager of Finance are not keen on the notion of slush funds, but I would say that directing monies towards some of the structures that we're putting into place to meet particular needs may be useful. And I think about family and community engagement, for example. So one of the things trustees have identified and have signaled to myself as well as the senior team is noticing the improvement of de-siloing portfolios, and so seeing that there are portfolios that intersect. So for example, family and community engagement intersects actively with equity as well as student achievement. But being a new portfolio, it draws from resources, and to use Trustee Bell's language earlier, reallocation of funds to advance that same work. And so if it were that the trustees saw fit to identify the direction of, X number of dollars, to use the money that was identified by Trustee Lara earlier, $200,000, directing it towards family and community engagement, that family and community engagement pool could in fact be directed towards schools that are identified high on the RAISE index. They could be moved towards schools that are, because we've been talking about SATE, but we're also trying to develop an equivalent approach at a secondary school level. And so as we look at credit accumulation at secondary schools that have similar profiles, is parlaying that piece, and it can go through the filter of family and community engagement simply because it is engagement for achievement. So I would say it's a little tighter than a slush fund, Trustee Huff, but I would say that there are pathways for directing that kind of opportunity, and family and community engagement is one of those pivotal portfolios that attaches a number of portfolios together in the same interest that you have been identifying, but with a community connection to it.
Thank you. I think it's very clear that as a group, we are committed to the equity agenda of this board, and that community of caring is clear in all of our intentions. So I think it's we're best served here to possibly step back and rethink about the wording of how we want to enable staff to move this agenda ahead. And maybe the motion that is on the table right now is too specific and not exactly what we need to do that. Just food for thought.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Huff. And I do see that CFO Carson had raised his hand. I presume you would like to speak specifically to this concept?
It's just Madam Chair, simply should we get to this, it's not unusual for us to put in what we call a provision as opposed to some of the other language for that particular purpose. And you've heard some of the language people have used to try to determine the scope of that provision. It's not unusual. In fact, we do have some of those already in the budget when we have an amount of dollars that have been allocated for expenditure in total, but the final plan for it has not yet been finalized. And, for example, we do have dollars that are enveloped out of the Indigenous student allocation that we have not fully expended, and that as that plan develops, those, whether it is programs or whether it might be positions, those would be charged against those particular dollars. So if it is a decision of the board to do so, we will set that provision aside, and as we normally do, when we have made the decision about how that is to be used, we would report back to the board during the course of the school year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, CFO Carson. And Trustee Lyra, I do see your hand.
It's back. So I think community engagement is too broad a term for the goals that I would like to see set out for this funding. I think community engagement is important, but I think you need to have some more qualification words on there to ensure that it is targeted community engagement to low income or equity seeking groups, because I think community engagement is great, but if we're allocating this money, it needs to be towards those equity seeking groups. And so I'd like folks to consider that when we're trying to decide how we're going to word this, not a slush fund, or the motion moving forwards.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Lyra. And I do not see any further speakers to this amendment. Therefore, I'm not sure if we actually have anyone suggesting a sub-amendment at all. So just to remind trustees, if this motion does fail, or this amendment, we are able to bring forward a new amendment speaking specifically to what's being discussed here. So I will then call the question on, oh, sorry, my apologies, Trustee Bell. You do have closing. Go ahead.
Great, thank you, everyone. I have to say I'm a little bit shocked that we don't have the confidence in the SATE program and the resources that have been identified as needed by Prince Dua, who is responsible for that. I know that Prince Dua and others in creating this program based it upon significant research and evidence and data pertaining to belonging, well-being, attendance, and academic achievement of these equity-seeking groups. And so I'm hopeful that, you know, way down the road, when he does get those actual data points and evidence for the OCDSB, we will be able to invest in it. But by that time, it may be too late, because as we know, equity-seeking objectives, and we know that this works. We know that the instructional coach will be able to take the best practices and the lessons learned and share those throughout our OCDSB community. We know that the community education liaison has been successful thus far and will be successful. And so the duplication that I've heard people proposing right now, this slush fund, it doesn't actually address the specific results indicators that we already have made up with this program. And so basically, I think a vote against this program is ultimately a vote of disconfidence, not being confident in the SATE program, because really, if you talk to the students, if you talk to the community members, if you look at the evidence, that's actually what has been proven to work. And we have it now. We have this program. It's taken 2 years to come up. So let's move it. Let's move this forward and actually expand it to where it is most needed. And let's deepen that. And these are the two positions that have been identified in order to do that. And it's 188,000. And we know that in future years, budgets are going to be tight. There will be constraints. And by actually supporting these FTEs, we help to ensure that these two individuals that will touch the lives of students are significant, are in our budgets going forward. And for that reason, I say these are the positions that we need. And I appreciate Prince Dua, the students, the ACE, and the other community members that have said, yes, I support this. This has results indicators attached to it. These are the positions that we'll touch. And so appreciate the conversation, but a slush fund is not going to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Bell. If we could please have the motion, or the sub-amendment, the amendment, pardon me, if we can have the amendment on the screen. Thank you very much. So trustees, we are voting on what is on the screen. Highlighted text that the board approve 188,000 in support of expanding the SATE program. And I'm just reading it into, just in case folks online cannot see the screen. And that would be in addition of one FTE community engagement liaison and a 1 FTE instructional coach. So all those in favor?
Bell in favor.
Okay, thank you.
Ellis in favor.
Fisher in
Myra
favor.
in favor.
Okay, all those opposed?
Blackburn opposed.
Demikins opposed.
Scott opposed.
Opposed.
Schwartz opposed.
Campbell opposed.
And any abstentions?
Penny abstaining.
Okay. So that fails, 5 opposed, 1 abstention, and 4 in favor. Okay, so we are now back to the main motion, the staff recommended budget. Yes, Trustee Huff.
I too have an amendment to bring forward this evening. It's a much more simple amendment, and I think that it might cause much less conversation, but if I could have a moment to please introduce it. And I believe, Nicole, you have the text that you could put up for people to see.
Yes, we do have the text in front of us, Trustee Huff, so please proceed.
So in my work with the Indigenous Education Council, it was brought to my attention that one way that we could make a very significant difference in this budget this year would be to allocate funds to transition what is now a 0.5 FTE position for the educational assistant at Urban Aboriginal to make that a full-time position. And the thinking behind that is that the difficulty is in attracting and retaining quality people for that position because it sits as a part-time position. So that is what I am trying to address, and I'm here to answer any questions if any of my colleagues have any.
Thank you for that short and summary introduction. Over to you, Trustee Blackburn, on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I'm very happy to support this amendment. I agree with Trustee Huff's analysis and the feedback from, I assume, IAC, that it would be hard to get somebody consistent in there on a part-time basis downtown. So very happy to support this.
Okay. Thank you very much, Trustee Blackburn. Trustee Campbell.
Thank you very much. I read the rationale and it seems reasonable to me, and I can see the yeah, I can see it, but just for a matter of I guess due course, I can't phrase escapes me, but I wouldn't really, nevertheless, get a staff comment.
Through you, Chair, Superintendent Smith is prepared to comment.
Good evening, and through you, Chair. It is true that this is a challenging position to staff due to its part-time status. It is an identity-specific position meant to support students at Urban Aboriginal. The initial allocation of the educational assistant, the 0.5, was made last year. We were able to staff it for most of the year, but it has been a challenge for sure. Thank you.
Great, that's it. Thank you.
I do see CFO Carson with his hand up. I believe you wish to speak to the question that was just raised.
Oh, Chair, briefly, I just wanted to indicate that unlike the previous motion, if this amendment is approved, it would not increase the overall expenditure budget of the board because those costs would then be charged off against the provision that's been identified already within the budget, which is approximately $450,000. So this would be the first $30,000 draw against it. So it will not increase the gross expenditures, nor will it increase the deficit.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification, CFO. Trustee Ellis, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. First, some clarification for what the CFO mentioned. So this would not be adding a further 0.5 FTE to the complement. It would just be reallocation of EAs already expected to be hired. Is that correct? Do I understand that?
Sorry, Chair, if I wasn't clear. No, we have, in addition to the staffing that's been recommended, there is a provision of approximately $450,000 identified for expenditure to serve Indigenous students. And it's this year, the rules around the enveloping of that Indigenous funding have meant that those dollars must be allocated in that area. We had not fully developed a plan for the final spending of those dollars, so it would not come out of the other recommended EA positions. This would be the 0.5 would be incremental to that.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to understand a little better the issues around staffing this position. Is it because of its part-time nature, or are there other issues in finding an EA that would meet the needs of this particular position?
Through you, Chair, I'll call on Superintendent Smith again to respond.
Pardon me, through you, Chair, could I ask the trustee just to repeat? I missed just a little bit of that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, it's been expressed that one of the challenges to staffing this position is its part-time nature. I'm wondering if there are other contributing factors to this being a challenging position to fill outside of its part-time nature.
I think the part-time nature is the key factor here for sure, Trustee Ellis. You know, it is an identity-specific position, and so we are looking for an Indigenous educational assistant to fill that role, and we are reserving that role for an Indigenous educational assistant. Whether that contributes to the challenge or not, you know, it's hard for me to say, but we definitely see the value in maintaining the position as identity specific to ensure that those who are working with the students at Urban Aboriginal share identity with the students who are in attendance.
Right. So I'm wondering, is there an opportunity for, if there was a Indigenous educational assistant, would be part-time at the Urban Aboriginal School, but could be offered a part-time, the other 0.5, supporting other First Nations, Inuit, and Métis students at other locations on the board?
Through you, Chair. I think that this position would be well used at Urban Aboriginal. One of the reasons that we introduced the educational assistant position last year was to support the inclusion of students who preferred to enter that program either at the grade 9 or grade 10 level, where it previously had only served students from grade 11 up. And we were experiencing demand from parents and students who wanted their children to have that opportunity right from the beginning of grade 9, rather than attending another school and then transitioning to Urban Aboriginal. So I think that it would probably be well used at the school. The position, though, would be essentially part of our Indigenous education and learning team under Principal Jody Kohoko. And certainly there would be an opportunity to take a look at, for instance, Richard Paff, which is an alternate school not that far from Urban Aboriginal and closely affiliated, that if there were students there requiring some support, I could see some collaboration between the two sites.
Okay, thank you. Just finally, I'd like to understand exactly, is this additional money? Because I'm a little confused with this 400 and some odd thousand that's set aside but not yet, if I understand, allocated within the sweatered funding, that this is sweatered funding for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. Am I understanding that, or is this, would this be an additional 30,000 outside of what's already allocated?
No, I think you had it right. I think the trustee had it right, Chair. Because this funding is sweatered and enveloped, much like Spec Ed, if those dollars are not spent, then they get carried forward. So as we develop the budget, we're working on the expenditure plan with one number in mind for the revenues we anticipated to receive through Indigenous funding. Turns out that that estimate was low by about $400,000. And so in order to make the expenditures match the revenue, we've put through that provision of $450,000. So as the fall progresses and as planning continues, Superintendent Smith and her team will identify a plan for the spending of those dollars. What would happen is, if this motion were to pass tonight, then that essentially is the first draw upon that $450,000.
So we're not really changing the budget here. We're just directing staff to hire someone. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Ellis. And yes, I think that that certainly helps to clarify your point made just now, Trustee Ellis, that in fact $30,000 amendment that's in front of us will not in fact adjust the budget at all. I don't see any further speakers to this item. Chair Scott, could I just ask you to take the chair? I do have a question.
I will do so, and please go ahead, Trustee Schwartz.
Thank you very much. So earlier, Director, the CFO was mentioning that we're quite tight, and I know last week when we were having staff do the presentation on the recommended budget, we had indicated that we are far tighter this year in terms of additional spending opportunities. So if this 30,000 is not part of the staff recommended budget, but would be found elsewhere, just could we get a number, please, so that all trustees are very clear? I believe I heard 250,000 earlier from the CFO, but perhaps if we could just get a clarification, as I do anticipate we may see further amendments coming forward this evening, just for trustees' clarification.
Yes, and the CFO is prepared to respond through you, Chair.
Chair, I did verify with Kevin Gardner. The exact amount is $180,000. If something were to come forward in the amount of $200,000, obviously we could make that work through the looking at some of our other estimates. But 180 is the exact amount at this point. I was mistaken. The 225 referred to an earlier draft of the budget.
Thank you, CFO. And just to confirm then, the $30,000 that is in front of us for the additional 0.5 FTE in Trustee Huff's amendment would not affect that 180,000. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Chair, back to you then, Trustee Schwartz.
Thank you very much. So I'm not seeing any further questions on this particular amendment. So trustees, if we could please have the amendment put up on the screen again, I will call the question.
Wrap up for Trustee Huff.
Oh, I'm sorry. I always forget. I do apologize, trustees. Trustee Huff, would you like?
Did you see me sitting there so patiently?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think that this is, a simple allocation that meets the needs of the community, as has been stated to me. I think that it's an easy way for us to make a difference in the effectiveness of a very important program. So I would ask that you support this amendment. Thank
you very much, Trustee Huff. All right, so I will call the question again for those that are tuning in this evening. The amendment that we have in front of us, moved by Trustee Huff, is that the expenditure budget be amended by an increase of $30,000 to increase the EA allocation at the Urban Aboriginal Program from 0.5 to 1 FTE.
Chair, excuse me. I'm still troubled here with the wording, and I'm asking. I'm bringing up a point of procedure or principle, whatever. It says it's that we're increasing the expenditure budget, but we're not. we're not, you know, so
Okay,
I'm just wondering.
Thank you, Trustee Ellis.
If I could get a ruling on whether this is in order?
Yes, appreciate that, Trustee Ellis. Yes, CFO Carson?
Chair, I believe that what the amendment would, and partly it's our fault because we were trying to work through some of those calculations this afternoon, and we had not really suggested a change, the proper wording for Trustee Huff. It probably should say that the expenditure budget be amended by allocating $30,000 of the existing provision on, and I'll ask Kevin Gardner to give us the get us the proper page reference and appendix reference by reducing that provision by $30,000 and by allocating the additional 0.5 FTE. I think that's the wording that achieves what the mover is looking for and makes clear that we are not increasing the overall expenditure budget.
Okay, so I probably will need some procedural help here from the staff. Since I called the question already and the mover had already had an opportunity to close, I don't believe we have an opportunity to sub-amend at this stage, but if I could get staff comment on that, please.
Executive Officer Giroux, would you care to comment?
Yes, and so just to confirm, you did already call the question?
Yes.
And so my suggestion to you is that you understand, that trustees understand that you've got a procedural issue with the language, and so that you vote against the motion that's on the floor, and we give you some substitute language, which might be as simple as that the EA allocation be increased in the program, be increased from 0.5 to 1.0 to be funded from whatever the manager says is the funding source, and then it won't be an increase in the budget.
Okay, yeah, I see. Trustee Ellis, do you have a point of clarification that you need on this?
Well, we're in budget. We're not in staffing. I have trouble from a governance point of view of half an FTE in the budget process. But anyways, go. Okay, that's the end of my objections. Just go ahead and I'll live with whatever happens.
Thank you, Trustee Ellis, for that is noted. Trustee Blackburn, do you wish to speak to? Oh, I can't hear you.
That's not our history. We've often added staff in the budget process. We've added social workers, psychologists. There's nothing wrong with this.
I think what, if I can paraphrase what I believe I'm hearing from Trustee Ellis, is that in fact, this is not, it is not germane to the actual budget, but specifically within a program allocation. And I think that is what he is claiming opposition to. Trustee Campbell?
Yeah, I think that governance, there's an interesting governance point raised. I think that one could cast this as a decrease of $30,000 in the $450,000 provision and an increase of $30,000 to add a 0.5 EA here. And that would be I think a thoroughly acceptable budget related motion. That's moving money, is decreasing one line item and adding, increasing another, or adding another.
Okay, well, so.
But they're sweater funds.
Okay, so let's not have this committee meeting get out of hand with people jumping in, please. I would ask though, Trustee Campbell, did you have something further? I still see your hand.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. So I'm thinking at this stage, we probably do need to, well, executive officer, what is the best course of action here, please? I could use staff assistance.
Well, I think the most straightforward course of action is to defeat this amendment and we put the corrected language on the floor. Alternately, if members feel comfortable with the understanding that the intent of what you're voting on is clear, and it's just the language that needs to be tidied up, and the committee is willing, we can tidy up the language, and that language will be presented to you when we get to board for approval. So we would be approving in principle with staff updating the language, and we're happy to do that. I think we've had enough examples. I think there's enough clarity on what you're voting on. It's just a question of, is the structure of the sentence appropriate?
Okay, no, that's appreciated. So trustees, we have two options here. One is to defeat this, and someone else will need to bring forward a substitute amendment. One of the trustees will need to do that with staff assistance to make sure that the language is appropriate, or we can pass this amendment recognizing that, or with the caveat that staff will bring forward language in the final recommendation that the board would be bringing forward in our final special meeting of the board. And I will just note that in the chat, Manager Gardner did specify that the Indigenous Education Supplemental enveloping capacity is $452,495. It's shown on page 6 of the budget binder, which is Appendix H to report 22-032. So just to clarify then, Trustee Ellis, it is germane then to the budget, given the fact that it is referenced actually in the budget binder. Okay, so since I have called the question, I will go back to calling the question on the proposed amendment from Trustee Huff. All those in favor?
Campbell in favor.
Huff in favor.
Lyra in favor.
Fisher in
Blackburn
favor. Sorry, Fisher in favor.
Board's in favor?
Demikins in favor.
Penny in favor.
Scott in favor.
Bella in favor.
Okay. All those opposed? Any abstentions?
Ellis abstains because we're not adding more to that, to the FMNI.
Thank you, Trustee Ellis, for the clarification on why. Okay, so that amendment passes with majority in favor, 1 abstention. Okay, so we are now back to, and I just again will clarify, I believe that staff, you have heard from trustees that they wish to have appropriate language presented when this comes to special board, even though we have passed this particular motion or this amendment, pardon me. So if we are now back on the main motion, do we have any further speakers to the main motion? Yes, Trustee Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know, I really don't have good wording here, but I guess to, in reference to, I guess, the previous amendment, I'd like to move a motion along the lines of, because I really don't have good words in my mind at hand here, of increasing, creating a $200,000 provision to help increase community engagement outreach in raise involved neighborhoods, but I'm certainly open to improved language. And if staff have improved language, I would throw myself on their mercy.
Trustee Campbell, I do believe that trustee Lyra had some suggested language, but seeing that you are moving an amendment.
Madam
with
Chair,
Mr.
might I,
Sassy.
point of order, Madam Chair, sorry.
Yes, please.
Might I
proceed.
remind my colleagues, this is a public meeting and things like amendments should not be put in the chat. Perhaps it would be more prudent, and I am supportive of what both trustee Lyra and trustee Campbell are trying to accomplish. Might I suggest that we take a 5-minute break and there's some work done with staff so that we can do this in a professional and expeditious way.
I appreciate that intervention, trustee Blackburn. You beat me to it.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
I was going to make that suggestion as well.
Sorry for stealing your thunder.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure that that members of the public who are tuning in also have the benefit of seeing what is being proposed. So let us take a 5-minute break and come back at 8:35. At that time, between trustee Campbell, trustee Lyra, and staff, hopefully we'll have some proper language.
Madam Chair, are we going to be thrown into a room together, or how will we manage this?
Well, that's a very good question. Executive Officer Giroux, I see your hand up, so please help me out here.
A question for trustee Campbell, and that is whether or not the language that trustee Lyra has proposed, which is that the budget be amended to create a $2,000 fund to $200,000 fund to support outreach needs of low-income communities. Is that consistent with your intent?
Entirely, and it's much better worded. I don't know if staff have better advice or different advice or not.
So if we take a couple of minutes, I think Manager Guthrie and I can put something together and bring it back to you.
Okay,
fantastic.
Perfect. So we will take a 5-minute break. It is now 8:31, so let's come back at 8:36. Thank you. Dear trustees, if we could reconvene, please. Can I just have you all open your cameras quickly so I can see if we have everyone back? I don't think we have everyone back yet. Trustees, please, if you have come back to the table, please open your camera so I can see. We've got quorum.
And the director's not here, Madam Chair. Oh, there
Yeah,
she
I
is.
see that. Okay. Okay, we've got majority of trustees back, and the director is back with us as well. Thanks. Okay, let's get back underway here. Trustee Campbell, the floor is yours. Did you have language you would like to propose as an amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would propose the language which staff has had a chance to look at, and I thank my colleague Lyra for the gist of it. I will amend the amount given the most recent information provided by the CFO. So what I will be moving then is that the budget be amended to allocate $180,000 to the purpose of supporting outreach to meet the needs of low-income communities.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Campbell. Would you like introduction?
Only very brief. This obviously really is just a fruit of the prior discussion. I think everybody knows the background. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Trustee Campbell. Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I will be supporting this, and I'd like to thank Trustee Campbell for putting it forward. I think this is a very prudent compromise and a better allocation of expenditure based on the staff feedback, and it does meet our goals under our equity plan and our strategic plan. So thank you again, Trustee Campbell.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Blackburn. Trustee Bell.
Thank you. My first question is, what is the probability that this funding will be used in support of the SATE program?
Director?
Through you, Chair, there's enough flexibility here to allow us to use it to support some of the community outreach that's required through SATE. So the intersection between many of the schools that are high on the RAISE index, in addition to schools that are in SATE, is enough to see some of this money used in that way.
Thank you, Director. And Trustee Bell, I'm not sure if you have a lot of background noise where you are, or if someone else is on. Yeah, that's better. Thank you. It's just very hard to hear the director when there's a lot of background.
Also difficult to have a meeting when you're also taking care of your daughter. So apologies for that.
Not a problem.
Here, the next question is, in fact, would this funding be best used to contract one community education community education liaison officer, so the CEL? Thanks.
Director?
I think that the goal here was to provide the flexibility to be able to look at a variety of options. And so to make a commitment at this time would be premature, I believe.
So would this funding be a one-year funding, or would it be for ongoing FTEs?
Through you, Chair, I'm not understanding that the amendment and the allocation of $180,000 is necessarily directed to any FTE. If there is in fact a contract or contracted positions that are a result, usually those contracted positions have a beginning and an end. So for example, if we were to engage translation services, for example, that would be a beginning and an end kind of relationship. So this, from my understanding of the allocation and the discussion that went ahead of it, this this I'm not interpreting to be directed to an FTE position, but to be able to use to resource these schools and these school communities in a variety of ways that would advance community engagement in the interest of student achievement and well-being.
Thank you. Is it your understanding that this would only be used for race schools, or will there be other factors taken into account?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Although it is that the amendment here speaks to low-income communities, the translation that I would draw would be raise, because there are intersections of a variety of social factors. So some of the social factors would include not only low income, but it would also include language realities, as well as any community realities that may have an impediment of families being able to access school and learning. So income is one context, but certainly we would be considering other contexts that speak to the race identification.
Great. How will you ensure that this does not duplicate and is connected to the SATE program and works with the resources already dedicated to that?
Through you, Chair, I'm not really sure about the question of duplication. I think that there's enough work to do that we wouldn't necessarily be duplicating. There may be opportunities to support or extend support or deepen support to race schools or to SATE schools rather. But I can imagine that there are other schools that are not in the SATE program where this kind of funding might help to improve the engagement of communities. So for example, we have secondary schools that are a part of the RAISE index and are high on the RAISE index, where there may be an ability to support some of those schools or some of the endeavors that those schools are undertaking as well.
Great, thanks. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Trustee Bell. Next, I have Trustee Scott on this amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the earlier discussion, I heard the concerns about SATE schools. I heard concerns also about low-income communities, and I heard concerns about supporting outreach to equity-seeking groups. And I guess what I'm trying to decide is whether there is any way to ensure that we are not just specifically talking low-income communities, but really what we are talking about is high needs communities of several different kinds. Certainly I took some umbrage when it was suggested previously that those of us who did not support the previous amendment had no confidence in the SATE schools. I have a great deal of confidence in the SATE schools, but what I don't know is exactly what additional kinds of support the SATE schools could beneficially use. So I guess my question through you to staff is whether there is any way that we could expand this to ensure that there is explicit reference to including raised schools, SATE schools, and equity-seeking groups or words to that effect.
Thank you, Trustee Scott, and I'm just I'm mindful that this is an amendment. I'm from Trustee Campbell, so I'm not sure if you're directing a question to him, asking if his intent was
I'm asking staff.
You're asking staff, okay?
If they have any words that any way that kind of additional language could be incorporated.
Okay, Director?
Through you, Chair, I would throw that over to Executive Officer. I believe that she does have some ideas in that around that issue.
You could make a fairly straightforward amendment to replace low-income communities with high-needs communities, and that would address the range of needs that the trustee identified.
Thank you very much for that suggestion. In that case, I would like to move a sub amendment to change low income to high needs.
Okay, thank you. Would you like introduction?
I don't think any is necessary.
Okay, so trustees, we do have a sub amendment to the amendment on the floor, replacing low income communities with meet the needs of high needs communities.
I think it's friendly.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if there were any speakers to this or if this is friendly. You're all beating me to things tonight. Just trying to make sure that we have enough time to see people's hands go up before I. Okay, looks like this is a friendly amendment. Trustee Scott.
Thank you. And with that amendment, I'm very happy to support this. There is some really good work underway in schools. And I think that if we give staff a little additional flexibility around this, they will put these funds to good use.
Thank you, Trustee Scott. So since that was friendly, we're back on the main amendment by Trustee Campbell. I will just note that the wording is a little awkward in that sub amendment where we have needs in there twice. Kind of the editor in me doesn't like that, but I can live with it. Trustee Lyra, you are up next on Trustee Campbell's amendment.
So I heard the director say that they're going to need time to figure out how to best allocate this money or best spend this money. Do you know approximately what month you will have figured out how to spend this money? I worry that we're going to allocate it and that we're going to come to June and realize that it has just gone unspent. And I'm wondering what the plan would be, or if we need to be more specific to help guide where the money might be allocated or when the money might be allocated.
Director, go ahead.
Through you, Chair, I believe, and perhaps the CFO will correct me if I'm wrong, just to get the budget cycle correct. But I do believe that we bring forward in late fall, early winter revised estimates, at which time we provide trustees with an update as to how we roll out we're rolling out the budget. And so CFO Carson, perhaps you can just remind me of our correct cycle, but perhaps it is in that cycle that we would be able to report on trustees by that time, because that certainly is well into the year. We would be able to either indicate how the money has been spent or how it has been allocated, and trustees are able to ask an explicit accountability question in that framework. CFO Carson, could you just remind us of the timeline, please, for when we bring a mid-year update to trustees on the rollout of our budget?
The opportunities for providing that information to trustees, the first one would be the update that Human Resources does in the fall by memo when we have completed our reorganization and completed our staffing based on the actual enrollments in the third week of September. The revised estimates report itself comes forward usually in January, occasionally in December. What we have done in the past, though, when we've had these sorts of provisions, is that when those decisions have been made, we would share that information by memo to members of the board, and with the details that we would have, what we expected the dollars to be spent on, what those timelines might look like, and hopefully some of the objectives we would have. It is really a function of the other work that will be occurring throughout the rest of June and early September as we come back to school. But depending on what else is going on, it's also possible that information could be provided via memo prior to the revised estimates.
Thank you. And if I may, through you, Chair, just to add to that piece. So those are the timelines when accountability can be expected. I think that when we look at, I don't mean to be pedantic, if you will, but currently the language that we're using are historically underserved communities. And so when we look at some of the needs of our historically underserved communities, we know that there is some level of urgency and some appetite to actively move. So to your question, Trustee Lara, while it is that I can't give you a date today, I can assure you that it will be very, very early in the fall where we would be able to look at how it is that those funds will be best serving those communities where the need has been identified. And that what we shared with you just now with the budget cycle is how it is and when it is that trustees can expect an accountability update if it has not yet been provided. So if you don't see anything in the update that comes through the human resources update staffing in the fall, September, October, or you don't get a memo before the revised estimates, certainly by the revised estimates is the opportunity to ask for that at accountability. But my intel would be that you would have that in advance of that time.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm leaving this slightly more reassured. I had a little bit of trepidation because the Green Climate Fund took a number of years to sort of get started, and that was another similar fund to be directed towards something that didn't have a specific ask. And I was concerned that if we put this money towards something without being specific, that it would just end up going unspent. So thank you for reassuring me. That was my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Lyra. Are there any further questions on this amendment? Yes, Trustee Bell.
Oh, it might not be on this amendment. I'm just wondering if this is just a one-year investment or if this is ongoing. Would that be appropriate for now or the full amendment?
Well, we are on Trustee Campbell's full amendment because
Perfect.
because it was a friendly.
Okay, great. So will this just be a one-time investment into outreach? Or will this be ongoing funding beyond this year?
I see that that CFO Carson has his hand up, so I'll let him answer that.
I think it would be funding that would
Trustee
be.
Bell, sorry, Trustee Bell, could you just go on mute, please? It's hard to hear the response. Thank you. Sorry, CFO.
No, that's okay. I think what it would be important to recognize that it would be included in the budget as part of our planned expenditures and as base. That does not guarantee it. When staff develop, every year we have to look at potentially every item in the budget, depending on what the overall funding from the province is. So there is nothing that's there permanently. This would, however, since we haven't seen anything to the contrary, this would be as part of the base expenditures, which I think is what the trustees asking, as opposed to some of the initiatives that we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, which were 1 year and time limited. This one doesn't seem to be time limited, so it'd be part of the base. But in full honesty, I think it would be one of those things that needs to be examined carefully each year as we look at going forward with the budget. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Bell, does that answer your question sufficiently?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that this would be based on ongoing funding. Thanks.
Okay, so do you have any further questions then to Trustee Campbell's amendment?
Nope, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any further speakers to to Trustee Campbell's amendment? Yes, Trustee Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could we see the proposed amendment as it stands now, please? As there may be a further adjustment to the wording.
Okay. So it currently reads that the budget be amended to allocate 180,000 for the purpose of supporting outreach to meet the needs of high needs communities.
Yeah, I think that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Scott. So seeing no further questions on this amendment, I will call the question. All those in favor?
Bell in favor.
Blackburn in favor.
Campbell in
Schwartz in
favor.
favor.
Lyra in favor.
Ellis in favor.
Hannigan in favor.
Huff in favor.
Any in favor?
Scott in favor.
Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, seeing none, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. So we are now back to the main motion.
And that's it for me, Madam Chair.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Trustee Campbell. Okay, so back on the main motion, I see Trustee Lyra.
I don't know if Nicole can pull it up.
Presume you have an amendment?
I do. So I would like to amend the budget by $5,000 to allow each of IAC, SEAC, and ACE to have up to 4 additional meetings per year.
Okay, Trustee Lyra, would you like to have introduction?
I would, thank you.
Proceed.
So I have sat on SEAC, it's a number of years ago now, and I've spoken with members of ACE and IAC, and one of the concerns that has been raised to me is that there's a limited number of meetings, and sometimes they want to meet and talk about things and they don't have the meetings per year to do so. I think we ask members of these committees to join unpaid and to come around and to give us their input and their feedback and their expertise. And if we don't have the meetings that they need to be able to give that meaningful feedback, I think we are doing a disservice to the people we are asking to come join our committees. And accordingly, I would like to make sure that they have the meetings that they need within reason to give us the feedback that we need to serve those communities. And so I am asking the board to put $5,000 towards the board committees to make sure that they have the resources for the extra 4 committees, or sorry, for the extra 4 meetings per year, which should make sure that they have the time and resources they need to give us meaningful feedback to the policies that we're and the programs that we're talking about. Thank you.
You, Trustee Lyra, Trustee Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question of clarification to the mover. Is that is that 1 meeting per group? No, there's only 3 groups. So are you asking for 12 additional meetings?
I am asking for 4 meetings per listed committee.
So yes, you're asking for 12. I can't see that I would support this. I don't know how the trustee came up with $5,000, but I would remind my colleagues that this is not just about money. SEAC has a statutory, it's in regulation how many times they need to meet. And I would remind my colleagues that this would also take a significant amount of staff time to organize this and for them to participate in it, particularly SEAC. where we have a substantial amount of staff, the superintendent, along with several other staff, and I'll remind my colleagues that I sat on and attended SEAC for many, many years, so I know of what I speak. And so I would like a comment from preferably the director about how she feels about this. If that's enough money, maybe somebody else would answer that, but specifically, Madam Director, if you will express to this committee your feelings about the impact on your staff.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'd have many questions about the goal here and how to achieve that goal. I'm not sure what the expectation for a $5,000 allocation would be for. We certainly have staff that are resourced to these meetings, and to the trustee's point, the work that is done in advance of the meeting and subsequent to the meeting for the meeting to run is significant. An addition of 4 meetings, for example, to SEAC would be moving. My understanding is that SEAC has a meeting every month, so that is 10 meetings in a year. So that would then render 14 meetings in a year. And so we would be looking at 2 meetings in some months. And so essentially it would pretty well need a dedicated staff to do that, because again, the hours of work prior and subsequent, as well as during, are significant. The question I guess I would have is the objective of increasing the number of meetings, because one of the questions that I would ask is, meetings to do what? When we have lots of meetings to discuss, usually out of those meetings, there's an expectation for some action and some implementation. And so oftentimes what we see when we see that these things are running well is that you would have a meeting, there would be discussion, there would be expectation, and then there would be time given for whether it's community to do the work or whether it's staff to do the work, but for work to happen. And then the subsequent meeting, there's a reporting. If the meetings are so frequent, there's not a lot of time to do any work. And so that is one of the things that I would ask a question about as well, is what would, there's lots of opportunity for conversation. I'd also like to remind the team here that advisory committee meetings, such as these advisory committees are but a few examples of the range of committee meetings that trustees and staff are charged with. And so committee of the whole, board meetings, just as we are here for budget, some of us are involved with audit committee. There are a significant range of meetings that in addition to advisory committees. And we also remind our public, as well as staff here, the team here, that we also strongly urge and encourage engagement in the school councils and school-based meetings as well. So this is not the only platform for communities to become engaged, and where community engagement is particularly effective is the closer to students and student schools, as opposed to at the board level. So those are a few thoughts that I have, but I guess the key thought here is, are we advancing towards improving work by adding more forums for conversation when the time that we engage is in fact finite, as well as the resource people to conduct these meetings, to resource these meetings, to support these meetings, and to follow up on the expectations after these meetings, that the human resources are also limited, and not really sure that we would deliver on an end that the mover is looking for. Did that answer your question, Trustee Blackburn?
Yes. Do I still have time? I believe I would. I didn't speak for that long. Yes, Madam Director, and I agree with your concerns. I might add that there's also PIC, and I noticed Ms. Melanison put up her hand. We also have OSTA, some of us participate on, and I agree with you. This would just, and I suspect, because many of us have indicated concerns about not having 2 committee of the whole meetings, and I hope we will be living in a post-COVID world where we will go back to our normal board calendar. So that adds another meeting that our staff have to prepare for. From a governance perspective, this is, in my opinion, just a very not good motion, and again, I'm not sure where what this $5,000 is where it's supposed to go, because if you look at SEAC, for instance, the staff salary in that room in any SEAC meeting is well over 400K. So I just don't think, in my opinion, this was just not well thought out.
Thank you, Trustee Blackburn, and thanks for for keeping an eye on the clock. Next, we have Trustee Scott.
Thank you. I did see CFO Carson's hand go up. I don't know whether he intended to comment on the previous speakers' questions and comments.
Thank you, Trustee Scott. Yes, CFO Carson.
Thank you, Chair. The mover and I had a discussion a few weeks ago, and what was requested was the amount of an increase in the budget for board services time. If you work through the additional hours, 4-hour meetings, multiply that by 4 times, I think is the multiplier that we look at, 16 hours per meeting. We used an estimate. The cost, that particular part of the cost, the $5,000 to $10,000, I think this amendment says 5, is really, as the director said, is not the significant piece of the puzzle. It's the role of the committees. It's the other people that will need to be able to support the committees. But the amount identified is that simply for additional board services time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CFO Carson. And I now see Executive Officer Giroux has put up her hand as well. Did you want to comment on this, Executive Officer?
Just clarify that it's not a straightforward one-to-one add dollars and there's more availability of staff. There's a cycle of work in the process that has to happen. And so at some point we reach the maximum number of meetings that a coordinator or the current coordinator team can manage the meeting and report, complete the minutes by the next reporting cycle, i.e. getting them to board, et cetera, et cetera. And so I say that only because ultimately it gets us into a cost scenario where you're not necessarily doing this within existing staff. You're looking at how do we resource and bring in an additional coordinator in some kind of capacity. So just as long as we understand that in addition to all of those things that the director and the CFO identified, the actual way the work plays out is also a factor.
Okay, thank you very much for those clarifications. So Trustee Scott, we have you up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, a question through you to the mover, which should be a simple answer. Is this $5,000 for the whole of the 12 meetings, or is it $5,000 per committee?
I was told by CFO Carson that it was $5,000 in board services time for the sum of the 12 meetings.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I think given that SEAC meets 10 times, must meet 10 times a year by regulation, SEAC would not belong in this particular list. The one that is omitted here, where I have heard interest in being able to have at least some additional meetings, is PIC. And I've also heard that at an interest in additional meetings at IAC and ACE. In planning the board calendar for next year, I know that the plan for next year's calendar is by no means finished yet, but through you, have staff given any consideration to including at least some additional meetings for some of these committees?
Thank you, Trustee Scott. Director?
Yes, through you, Chair. Certainly, this has come up already, and we've asked the why question. So, what is the goal, and what is the hope for the increased time? One of the things that we know is that sometimes when we understand the goal, the vehicle may be a different vehicle. So there are discussions about what it is that the committees want to do. What do they need from staff to be able to do them? And so the simple replication of existing structures over more time isn't necessarily going to make that achievement. That said, it doesn't preclude that from happening, and we have contemplated that. But I think that we need to be cautious again, to rather than just simply, taking what we have and just simply arbitrarily saying, okay, we'll add 5 more, doesn't necessarily get to the problems that the committees might be identifying. And so I think that there's a process first to identifying what the need is, and looking, are there other structures and other opportunities, and a revisioning of how advisory committees work in order to achieve those goals. I'm not convinced that simply replicating what we already have and expanding it will necessarily improve the situation, and possibly could actually exacerbate existing problems. So the short answer is yes, we certainly are open to contemplating other additional meetings, but I'm not sure that we have arrived at the place where we're convinced that only additional meetings will in fact solve the issues that are observed and meet the purpose and the goals that have been identified.
Thank you for that. Based on long experience and observation of a lot of our committees, what I have seen is quorum issues for some of them, where even with the number of meetings they have right now, they do not always get a significant proportion of the committee membership out to a meeting. I also note that there are some months where it is really difficult to have additional meetings. For example, in December, that has historically been a bad month. We lose time for the Christmas break, plus a lot of people are very much engaged in seasonal events in their school communities and don't have the time to come out to meetings. We have similar issues around the month of March because March break falls in the middle. And usually we also at that time have some fairly heavy duty board level decisions to make. June is also for some committees a problematic month because it's so late in the school year, and any new decisions would be difficult to action before the fall. Sometimes June meetings are useful and can be well attended and productive, but certainly it depends very much on what work is envisioned for those meetings. Similarly, in September, it's great to get started early in the school year, but also we're dealing very often with parents who have a lot of issues and concerns around getting their kids off to school and engaging with their school councils and attending school events, getting the school year started. So again, the participation can be patchy. I think that the possibility of adding some meetings is a good one, but I'm just wrapping up here, Madam Chair, but we really need to understand what would actually be achieved by adding meetings.
Okay, thank you very much for wrapping up quickly there, Trustee Scott.
I have a point.
Yes.
Sorry. Point of personal privilege to correct an error in fact. One of the previous speakers said that SEAC can only meet 10 times a year according to the regulation. The regulation says the committee shall meet at least 10 times each school year, which does allow for the possibility of additional meetings.
Okay, thank you very much for that point of privilege and that correction to the record as well, Trustee Lyra. I don't know if staff wish to comment on Trustee Scott's remarks, or I wasn't sure if, no, okay. So next then we'll go to OCASC rep Christine, if you'd like to proceed.
Hi there. Thanks, Chair Schwartz. I just want to touch on a few things here. I also sit as the vice chair of PIC while not sitting in that capacity here. And as one of the advisory committee members, I do know that there is a bit of a disconnect. And part of the problem is some of the scheduling that works with some of these meetings. I have a feeling you'd have a better turnout, you'd have better chances of quorum if you ended up with more meetings and actually had regular schedules. Right now, they seem to tend to be random. There's 2 months in between them. There's disconnect between the members themselves when they're supposed to go back, when they're supposed to get feedback. There's disconnect between how some of these subcommittees are supposed to work. There's lack of communication sometimes between staff and the committee members themselves. I have a feeling that something that seems at the moment may seem to the board as is adding a few meetings really going to make a difference. I think it would in creating continuity. It would in creating consistency. It would in creating a schedule. It's much easier as parents who are joining these committees. If I know that the third Monday of every month, I'm going to be at PIC, then I can schedule the third Monday of every month, be it December or March or June, that's where I'm going to be. And the same can be said for ACE and SEAC and all the other ones too, and IAC. So that's definitely doable. I do notice that PIC has been omitted here. PIC has raised concerns about this. I personally have this year. 6 meetings is not enough for proper engagement in the case of PIC. There's no way that that's enough when you come in halfway through the year and start, and I'm sure some of the other committees think the same way. As someone who's sitting on those committees, I just wanted to give that feedback so that you could sort of hear from someone who's living it and doing it and has been doing it now for 7 years and being involved in this. I think that you could be providing a much better, stronger service to the community as a whole, to these committees, to the committee members that are giving their time by actually adding some of these meetings. And I think that what Trustee Lyra is trying to do is creating a much more solid foundation within those committees. And if anyone wants to actually chat later on or at any other time and talk about what it's really like to sit on there as a parent, I know I'm happy to reach out to any of the trustees as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Trustee Penny.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I'm not totally convinced this is a budget issue. I think this is a much larger issue that needs to be tackled, is the role of our advisory committees. And therefore, I'm not really a fan of just throwing money at a problem like this with no definition of what we're trying to resolve. I mean, I don't think it's well costed. I don't think it's the impact is totally thought out. I also think that $5,000 is woefully inadequate based upon the impact of what additional meetings would bring. I think that, based upon what executive officer is saying, that, it could be up to hiring an additional coordinator, or at least, half an FTE to actually not only coordinate, but run the meetings, to actually document what was said and all the rest. I think given that, I think of our parent community. If the parent community thought that we're hiring, instead of hiring an EA, we're hiring an additional board coordinator to run more meetings, I can see that they would probably be abhorred by the fact that we're taking the money away from the school and putting it into something to run more meetings. I think that that our parent community would not be very positive in receiving that. So I think that we should, instead of doing this very, very quick and very, very dirty thing that is probably not going to suffice, that we need to look at the issue in a bit more depth and take it away from the budget thing that we're doing right now.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Penny. Director, I see you've raised your hand. I believe you wish to respond to Trustee Penny.
I'd like to build on Trustee Penny's point, and I'd like to respond to earlier comments. Trustee Penny has made a very salient point, which I think is really important, is how it is that we look at this as a bigger picture item in terms of the advisory committees as a whole, as a part of a parent engagement paradigm. I think it's really important that we remember that there are individuals for whom we might talk about an hourly rate, or we might talk about compensation that way, but we also have staff in attendance at all of these meetings for whom it is a part of their portfolio. So when we look at whether it's the senior team, whether it's managers, whether it's assistant principals, in each and every one of these meetings, we have that kind of representation, and it's simply a portfolio piece. And so when we start reconciling that conversation between staff well-being and dare I say succession planning with the number of meetings, we're talking about days that are full work days as well as full work nights. And so this is when we do have quite a robust number of those opportunities in our district with the commitment to engaging with community. And so we need to be very cognizant of why it is that we would be increasing and where. The other piece that is important to reflect is when you look back at the data of this year alone. And I'm going to be ad hoc here because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do know trustees will be well aware of what I speak, of which I speak. We had a number of policies that came forward this year for approval, and each of those policies required consultation. There is a very robust and enshrined in policy, if you will, directive around consultation, and that is continued to be reviewed and expanded and very much honed into. To ensure that every time we come forward with policy changes, there is a robust consultation experience. And so that also are hours of staff work and staff engagement with community to collect that information. And with the three major policies we did this year, there were significant hours of engagement in that manner. So that ad hocness does arise as well. So I think that this is not a mathematical arithmetic type of enterprise. This is more like calculus than it is arithmetic, if you will, because there are lots and lots of components here. And if we start to think about what we want to do to maximize the capacity of our system to be able to deliver change and move, that is one of the things. The last thing that I'd like to say is that we also need to consider who has access and who engages in these committees, and who does not. And so when we start to think about equity and voice, we have to think about whether or not these are committees that engage everyone, or are there better structures? Because I have heard from community members that some of these structured meetings are intimidating and troublesome, and so don't necessarily invite certain communities to engage, whereas other opportunities that are closer to the school or closer to the communities are more inviting, and they do partake. So I think there are multiple factors to consider, and I think that Trustee Penny's very thoughtful approach around how to do a better analysis before making a decision around adjustments to advisory structures might be the way to go.
Thank you, Director. I have Trustee Campbell up next.
Thank you very much. I am broadly sympathetic to the motivation of Trustee Lyra here in order to effectively give additional resources to committees if they have expressed the view that they don't believe they have sufficient resources to do what they would like to do properly in a quality way and address tasks at hand. So I do think that's something that has to be considered. However, I do agree, I have to say, with some other speakers, perhaps especially Trustee Penny, but others, that to me, yes, while pro forma, this is a budget motion, it isn't really a budget motion or a budget amendment from my perspective. It really is sort of a governance question, relationship question, communication question, etc. And I think a lot has to be discussed and worked out. I do appreciate Trustee Lyra bringing this forward because obviously, if nothing else, it's a conversation starter. And I would hope that we do, if this amendment should not pass, we don't pass up the opportunity to carry on the conversation and have those discussions, canvass advisory committees and communities what they would like to see, what would work better. And maybe more meetings would be part of it. I don't think we should assume necessarily that every meeting needs to be a full court press of all staff. Maybe sometimes community members want to speak more or less to themselves with staff coordinator present. So I mean, I don't think we should make assumptions, but I do think that we need to dialogue, and I think that their discussions have to be pursued in a variety of ways. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Campbell. Trustee Blackburn, I did see your hand, but it's just come down again. Oh, it's back up again. Would you like to speak to this?
Yes, I apologize. I was stuck on mute there. Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you.
Okay, but before, because you're a second time, I just wanted to double check that there's not any other first time.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't see anybody else raising their hands, so go ahead.
All right, thank you. So before I became a trustee, I actually sat on 3 committees of the board, so I was very active. And I remember very distinctly when I was on OCASC, saying to my OCASC colleagues at the time, we are not normal people. And by that I meant, not in a bad way, but that the average parent, they're not into going to numerous committee meetings of school boards like I was, like I still am, obviously. And I remember my spouse, in fact, saying to me, is there a committee you're not on? Because I find it quite, I'm passionate about it, and I find it quite stimulating. So I like to go to a lot of committee meetings. But I agree with the director. I think there's a different way we need to come up with a different way to engage parents. Even I go to school council meetings. I've got some schools with 800 students and 4 parents show up to school council. That's a very, 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 very small percentage of parents. But in my experience, sometimes when I'm enmeshed in something, I think everybody else wants to be enmeshed in something, and I've come to realize that that's not actually the case. I happen to be passionate about certain things, and we're not talking, this amendment's not talking about adding a few meetings. It's a lot. It's way more than a few. And to go, and I'm going to harp on this, and I'm not going to stop harping on this. We are going to burn out our staff. And I would like to remind my colleagues that our staff, as the director has indicated, have day jobs. Then they're expected to come to many evening meetings, expected to attend school councils, which, we might not think of. And I might, remind my colleagues that these people also have families. They have a life. And we need to really consider that, because this is not only hard on them, but it's hard on their families. And I just don't think it's fair. And to the director's point, I don't know what it's going to accomplish. There's a lot. We have email. Everybody who has a concern can email any one of us at any given time. And I haven't really seen this as a big concern. And our meetings are scheduled, and they always have been. Now we get snowstorms and we have, breaks and such, but we've always had scheduled meetings.
Thank you for watching the clock yet again, Trustee Blackburn. All right, I don't see any additional speakers to Trustee Lyra's amendment. So back over to you, Trustee Lyra, for wrap up.
So I want to thank Trustee Penny because I actually had the same questions. I said, wouldn't we need to look at hiring maybe another part FTE or 1/6 FTE or to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the board? And this is the number that the CFO gave me. He said that this is what it would cost, and I took that at face value and put it in the amendment. I want to highlight to folks that I picked the committees that are our equity-seeking groups. These are not just parent council, because parent council is a self-select in-group, and we've heard this a number of times. These are the groups of people who represent the marginalized communities in our schools. And so I think we need to be willing to say, these are voices that need to be outsized, that need to be adequately resourced, and we need to be willing to put our money where our mouth is and say, we're willing to put funding towards this. I recognize that there is concern that there might be staff burnout, that there might be too many meetings, but I think that that's a decision that the board would then say, okay, if we think we have too many meetings and we want to prioritize this, we need to hire additional people or we need to adequately fund this. I don't think I could have brought this forward in another context, because if I had brought it forward and said we should have additional meetings, the turnaround would have been, well, we don't have the budget for it. It's not in the budget. We don't have the staff time. We don't have the resources. And so I think, despite the concerns of some of my colleagues, this is absolutely a budget motion. And if the answer that we got is $5,000 isn't the right number, we would need 1/6 of an FTE or 1/2 an FTE or whatever the number might be, then that would be a budget discussion, because I really do think that we need to adequately resource these. I also want to respond to those who say I do not think out my motions. I've been working on this for weeks, and I do believe that this is well reasoned and well thought out, and these are the committees that some of them have said in years past or in years recently that they don't have enough meetings, that they want to meet and discuss things that are coming to board and they don't have time. And when I put this forward, I was envisioning a floating schedule where they would be able to say, we would like to schedule a meeting for 3 weeks from now because there is something coming to board and we don't have a meeting between now and then with what board is discussing on the agenda. I'd like to empower our committees to be able to make meaningful choices and to be able to give us meaningful input. So I would encourage all of my colleagues to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lyra. And if I may just note one small thing in this motion before I call the question. I don't think the acronym is correctly spelled out for IAC.
Through you, Trustee Schwartz or Chair Schwartz, it is. The committee is now the Indigenous Education Council.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure, because we often refer to it as IAC. So I just wanted to note that and appreciate the clarification. All right, so I will then call a question on this amendment. Those in favor?
Trustee Lyra.
Those opposed? Oh, sorry, I missed that. So sorry, Bell, Trustee Bell, that was in favor?
Correct.
Thank you. All those opposed?
Blackburn opposed.
Scott opposed.
Ellis opposed.
Campbell opposed.
Huff opposed.
Opposed.
Okay. So that motion fails. Trustee Huff, do you have your hand up for the main motion?
Just hold over. Slow with the buttons.
All right, not a problem. So we are now back to the main motion with that one amendment. that we had earlier that did pass. Any further speakers to? And in fact, actually, Trustee Lyra, I think you may have had some time on the clock still.
No further amendments, but I counted 2 amendments that passed.
Oh, you are right. There are 2. My apologies. I'm not tracking it myself properly. Okay, are there any further speakers to, yes, Trustee Scott, on the main motion.
On the main motion, Madam Chair, we have had some good discussion and debate this evening. I'm not sure whether there are other people who are contemplating possible amendments. There may be some who are, but haven't finished working through them yet. And the other thing I would note is that we have not had an opportunity for any questions with regard to the questions and answers, for which my appreciation to staff for getting that out in a timely way to us today. But what I'm wondering is whether we should adjourn the meeting for now, perhaps offering an opportunity for questions on any questions about the answers to in the Q&A document, and then see whether there are any additional amendments that come forward at the next scheduled budget meeting.
Yes, I appreciate you bringing that forward, Trustee Scott. Keeping in mind, we do have a scheduled meeting for next week, where we also have a special board that is currently scheduled right after the committee of the whole budget. So I'm fine. I was assuming that trustees were not necessarily ready this evening to proceed to voting on the staff recommended budget with amendments. But yes, Trustee Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just so I'm clear about what is being proposed, is there going to be an opportunity for follow-up questions on the staff Q&A, or is that reserved to another time? Or
No, I think we'll. If you wish to bring questions this evening, we can certainly start this evening. I know it was just circulated today, so I'm not sure trustees have had an opportunity to thoroughly read through the questions and answers. I think we will certainly reserve time at a future committee of the whole meeting as well. But if there are questions this evening, by all means.
I just have one quick one, and don't necessarily need an answer now, but I'll just log it with staff.
Please proceed.
Oh, yeah, I should ask. Okay, thank you very much. And that is with respect to the OCNet reply, and I very much I did read through them all, and I'm thinking about another couple, but don't really have a well-formed follow-up questions yet. But with respect to that one, in spite of staff's brave best attempts, I'm still not quite sure what the net money per student is that we receive, especially given my understanding, which may be incorrect. The ministry is now looking to take a slice of these kinds of monies. What I see is amounts about yes, how much the tuition is, and 35% goes back, and this happens and that happens, the other thing happens, but I don't really have my per student head number at the end of the day. or that I'm reading in the reply anyway, in terms of what our net really is once everything's said and done. So I don't know if staff can reply now. If not, I don't need the answer right now.
Chair, I guess we'll take another look, and if other members of the committee have the concern, we can publish something, but I think we'll follow up directly with Trustee Campbell, because it's a messy one, simply because our expenses as a board are not always incremental. So we'll see. Maybe we'll talk to Trustee Campbell and we'll see if we can clarify.
That's why it might be my particular bugbear, but it is one. Thank you. either way, yeah.
Thank you, Trustee Campbell. Any further questions this evening on the motion before us, the staff recommended budget, on any particulars, or the staff Q&A document? Waiting a moment. Sometimes I know people take a few minutes to get unmuted. Okay, then, seeing none, I won't go to call the question this evening, as I don't think trustees are likely ready to vote on the staff recommended budget. But just as a reminder, we do have another meeting scheduled next week, Thursday, June the 16th at 7 p.m., where we can continue the budget debate and follow up on any Q&A from on the document itself. So we'll move then to new business. Is there any new business this evening? All right, seeing none, I would like to indicate that the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much for everyone participating, and we will see you all again next week. And I will echo the thanks that Trustee Blackburn gave in her opening remarks, both to CFO Carson in particular, as well as the staff team for pulling together this budget. So we will see you all next week. Thank you very much.